So does spending too much time on social media like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat actually increase loneliness and depression? That's the new finding of a brand new study by researchers at the University of Pennsylvania to be published in the peer-reviewed Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology. And it marks the first time there's been a causal connection established between time spent on social media and depression and loneliness. The lead author, Melissa Hunt, told me that the undergraduate subjects who limited their time on Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat to 30 minutes or less daily saw a marked decline in rates of loneliness and depression.
Okay, so today in class we read Crutz, chapter 8 on media, and we also read an article by Ronald Deibert, The Road to Digital Unfreedom, 3 Painful Truths About Social Media. Now in this article, Deibert cautions you about the role that social media plays in your life, and by extension, the role that social media plays in democracy. Turns out that if you run a democracy with 300 million voters, the voters may behave really differently if they are hooked into social media every day versus if they are not hooked into social media every day. So Deibert makes 3 main points. He says, 1, the social media business model is based on deep and relentless surveillance of consumers' personal data in order to target advertisements. That seems fair enough. If you sign up for Instagram, if you sign up for Facebook and you use them, those companies, because they're on a private platform, you have no expectation of privacy, especially from the company itself. Not only can they see everything you're doing, they own everything you're doing. Yes, that means how long you linger over a photo before moving on, even if you don't like or comment on the photo. How long it's on your screen is recorded. They can see what you're doing and what you're looking at all times. And they sell that data to advertisers. 2, we permit this staggering level of surveillance, if not altogether wittingly. These services are still incredibly popular. Some people sort of know they're being spied on, others don't. Some people are like, well, they spy on me, but it's kind of not that bad. Or they just don't really think about the trade-off too consciously. They're like, well, what am I going to do? Not be on Instagram? 3, social media are far from incompatible with authoritarianism and are indeed proving to be among its most effective enablers. There was a time called 2010 in which social media was thought to be a vector of democracy. Twitter, for example, played a huge role in various uprisings in the Arab world that were once called the Arab Spring. People thought that Twitter and other means of democratizing communication would lead to democracy in real life. That means you could no longer have an authoritarian political system in the age of Twitter because people would just tweet out their criticisms and you can't censor the whole internet. And so it was a way of getting around dictators and around authoritarian regimes. But fast forward 10 years here in the year 2020, that now seems like a very naive and a very credulous and a very optimistic view of the role social media can play in democracies. Facebook, for example, played a huge role in providing people with misinformation and confusing voters during the 2016 election. And so it seems that social media is not this amazing vector of democracy and that it can be used to enable the rise of misinformation, lies, and authoritarianism as effectively as any other mass communication technology that's come along. There's also this additional consideration when it comes to social media that's sort of about the allocation of resources and what we choose to spend our money and time on. If you think about the top graduates every year in mathematics, those graduates have a lot of really interesting jobs available to them. They can go build better rockets so that we can go to the moon again. They can go design new medical equipment and computational technologies for fighting illnesses so that we can have better medicine and we can develop vaccines for infectious diseases quicker. There's a million amazing jobs you can do. What has been happening over the last decade is that social media companies like Facebook have been poaching the top mathematics graduates with the enticement of huge salaries to come work for Facebook and to use all of their skills in mathematics and algorithm building to trick their users into staying on a page for 5 seconds longer, because that means they can sell 5 seconds more ad revenue.
What are some examples of apps that people use on a pretty regular basis, and the ways that these companies are drawing this in?
Have you noticed if you ever log into Twitter, as an example? So there's an extra delay that you don't know how long it's going to take. It's between 2 and 3 seconds. where the number of new notifications on Twitter you have. So why is that there? Well, it makes that into what's called a variable schedule reward. It's like a slot machine. So you're playing the slot machine, and there's a time delay, and in that time delay, your anticipation's building, and then you get to see how many notifications I get. And so you become more addicted to checking it again the next time.
It sounds like there's just a lot of sort of trickery going on here.
I call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem to, get people's attention at all costs. Let's say I'm YouTube and I've got a certain amount of people's attention. What's YouTube's biggest competitor? Probably Facebook. Or take the CEO of Netflix recently said that the biggest competitors to Netflix are probably YouTube, Facebook, and sleep. Meaning sleep, because at the end of the day, there's a finite amount of time people have, and if you're not getting people's time, someone else, some other app, or some other part of someone's life is going to get it. So these services are in competition with where we would want to spend our time, whether that's our sleep or with our friends. There's this war going on to get as much attention as possible.
Tristan, tell me about how you use your phone.
I try to use it as consciously as I can. One thing, for example, is I set it up so that I just have my in and out tools and my aspirational ways I want to spend my time on my home screen. So
what do you mean by in and out tools? What does that mean?
A tool is something that you use and you never use it longer or more than you want it to. For example, Google Maps. Like if I need directions, I don't end up scrolling through Google Maps for a half an hour randomly, right? I just go in and I find where I need to go and then I go out.
And these are things that really don't draw you in for long periods of time.
There's nothing on my home screen that is explicitly makes money from or wants to maximize how much time I spend. And I put all those other things inside of folders that are hidden. So I think we have to recognize that as human beings, there's just a certain set of things we're vulnerable to that do influence us. And if it buzzes right now, I would probably, without even thinking about it with you here, check it. And so if I don't want that to happen, I just have to put it away. In fact, my phone just buzzed right now. Then I just looked. There you go.
Even knowing what you know, you still picked it up.
And this is the thing that even the people in the world of persuasion we were talking about earlier, who know all about these tricks of how to get people to use products and to use a slot machine dynamic, whatever it is, they'll tell you that they themselves are no less vulnerable than the regular person because these techniques work on everybody. It's just part of being human.
It turns out the human brain is the type of thing that can actually be manipulated or hacked into relatively easily. For example, people run studies and they find that when you make someone consciously click next page on Reddit or Instagram or a site like that, they will browse fewer pages than if you just have the new content load at the bottom of the page while they're scrolling on their phone. And if the new content just loads automatically, it's called infinite scroll, then people will spend hours mindlessly browsing through your app with you selling them, of course, ads and selling advertisers their information the whole time. You thought infinite scroll was just like this feature you never really think about that's now on like all of your social media apps. But actually, infinite scroll was designed by attention engineers because they understand how the human system of visual perception works and how your brain's attention systems and feedback loops work. And they are exploiting those so that you will spend 4% longer on a page so that they can sell 4% more ads. Almost all apps have switched over to a tiny red little bubble with a number inside it telling you how many notifications or interactions you've had since you last logged in is another feature of attention engineering. Human beings react really well to contrast and our brains are hypersensitive to pattern recognition. And so when those icons pop up, we are driven by an almost deep need to click on them. You sometimes will do it almost mindlessly. We've all had the experience of being on your phone, opening up an app, kind of scrolling mindlessly for a few seconds, closing the app, and then scrolling back and forth through your phone, reopening that same app, scrolling mindlessly, closing the app again, and just kind of repeating that loop over and over again. And sometimes you stop and go, oh my God, what am I doing? Like I'm just opening the same like 3 apps and then closing them again on my phone. Like, do I even have a brain? Like, what is going on? Well, it's not your fault. It turns out that human beings have never carried around tiny little glowing rectangles with moving images of themselves and other people on it. And if you give it to a chimpanzee, the chimpanzee does the same thing a human being does. They compulsively look at everything they can. They're fascinated by images of themselves on the screen. They're fascinated by images of their friends on the screen. They're fascinated by images of attractive chimpanzees on the screen. And if they could understand the numbers, they would be incredibly sensitive to the amounts of likes and interactions that they get on social media. Human beings are social creatures, and we've always been carefully conditioned to be sensitive to how much other people like us and are interested in us. Because if other human beings like you and are interested in you, it means that you are safe and you are protected and you have a kin group. Human beings really like that, and that's normal and healthy. But we've never had an empirical counter of how many friends you have. This is a deeply unhealthy thing. And so for the first time, you take a social species raised on grasslands and savannas, and you give them a tiny glowing rectangle that looks beautiful to their highly developed visual cortex. It looks like a tropical bird. And it also tells them how many friends they have and how much those friends actually like them. You can't even begin to understand the psychological damage and what that does to their brainstem. In fact, we don't understand it because we've only had this type of social media and smartphones since about the late 2000s, so only about 10, 11, 12 years at the outside. So we don't actually know what's going to happen. We don't know what the effects of this will be in 40 years. We don't know what the effects will be on us personally and on democracy as a whole. A further problem with this is that social media virality and popularity often runs on fear, not facts. It runs on our basest emotions. Human brains don't actually want the truth. They just want dopamine and stimulation. And if you give them that stuff, the truth becomes dispensable.